before you start to have the conversation, you can actually just come to a place of being present with one another and create some safety in each other's bodies. So an exercise I usually tend to guide couples through is just sitting in front of each other, eye gazing with one another, and just breathing together. Maybe you take 10 breaths together, maybe you take 20 breaths together. But what this is doing is this is co-regulating each other's nervous systems, and it's kind of bringing you into your body, into your heart, rather than coming from the mind and dropping to the heart, so that you can really have a authentic, connected conversation.
This is episode number 686 with Tugce Balik. We are talking today about why pleasure is essential, not just it's mandatory. It's really important to our wellness, and it's no longer taboo. This is a really interesting topic. I can't wait to get into it. Hi, everybody. I am Sandy Weiner. I'm a certified dating and relationship coach, and every week I bring you expert advice and real conversations about love, connection, and healthy relationships. At Last First Date Radio, we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. For more information on my coaching programs, both personal one-on-one and group coaching, my courses, I do both do-it-yourself and live coaching courses, and I have 3 books. Go to lastfirstdate.com. And before I bring Tugce on, I would love for you to join me at Your Last First Date. That's my Facebook group for women over 40 who are interested in a place that encourages personal growth. We have had many people who have gotten married through the work that we've done through the group, and they stay because the advice is still supportive. So that's a pretty rare thing in the world of Facebook groups. So if you are single or in a relationship and you would like to grow on your journey to your last first date, join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest. Tugce Balik believes that pleasure is essential to our wellness. She blends Western science with Eastern traditions to help people heal, reconnect, and feel at home in their bodies and with each other. She's a certified Tibetan Tantra practitioner and an American Board-Certified Sexologist. She has a focus on healing through embodiment. I love that. Her approach is gentle, empowering, and rooted in deep care. And to her, pleasure is not something that you earn. It is your birthright, your medicine, and her work at Arya helps couples remember exactly that. Welcome to the podcast, Tugce.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandy. I'm super excited.
I'm excited too. I think that we really struggle with pleasure, with talking about sex, and just a warning, I forgot to say this up front, but if you have small children or any people who should not be here talking about this topic, please don't listen to this in front of them. So tell me, Tugce, why do you think pleasure is not so taboo anymore and it's really essential to our wellness?
That's a great question. I think, how I like to describe it is we're kind of in like the second wave of like the wellness space. So I think when wellness initially hit, we were very much focused on, our bodies, yoga became really big, meditation became very big. People had this orientation of, oh, maybe self-care can expand beyond just, getting my nails done or, taking a nice bath. Like, what does wellness really look like for me? And I think one thing that has always happened is we've always decoupled wellness and intimacy or sex in the past. I think what we're now understanding is we can't really decouple our sexuality from our humanity. That kind of what makes us, total. That's a huge part of our experience about what drives us, what interests us, how we form relationships. We can't just separate them. And another point of this is I really believe just being in the space, I think all of us have in some form, some sort of rooted sexual trauma, right? Whether that's through our experiences or whether that's through our upbringing, our family, our religious conditioning, everybody has some sort of taboo, some sort of hold, some sort of feeling towards their own sex, sexuality, sexual orientation. So I think it's something that really drives human behavior and desire. And the more and more we understand and expand our understanding of wellness especially in terms of couple dynamics, we realize how important it is to have a healthy relationship, to have an intimate and like healthy sex life as well. So I think the misconceptions are changing, but I think the statistics are not changing in terms of, more and more people are not having sex. Currently we have over like 20.4 million, I think this is only in the US, marriages that are in sexless marriages. So there's a huge gap and a huge understanding. I'm sure, as you know, people don't get taught about relationships. Similarly, people don't get taught about how to communicate, how to engage, how to deepen, how to improve their sex lives. So there's a huge discrepancy there of like how we're meant to be how we're meant to act in relationships and what the reality is of like what tools we have.
I love that you bringing the wholeness piece to this, that wellness is not just about getting our nails done, but it's about our mental health. It's about our bodies. It's about our pleasure. And we can't really have a life that's so separate, have a good life that's so separate. And so many people are in these sexless marriages. I do agree that so many of us have had some type of sexual trauma or taboo from so many different sources. And I'm curious about your own upbringing, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about like what brought you to this passion of yours and,
Totally.
What it was like for you growing up.
Totally. So I'm originally from Turkey. So I grew up in Turkey, which is known to be a more conservative, let's say, country compared to North America. But I think I was very fortunate that my mom was very open and liberal and didn't really shy away from these topics. So growing up, I think even though environmentally I had some, like I was aware that it was a taboo and, like that conversation was happening in my home and household, it was actually quite open. Like my mom would have, different sex books and like educational books, and she would answer the questions that I had because as children, we're all very curious and aware of our genitals from a young age. And, that's like when the first shame usually comes in when you start touching yourself at the age of 3 and 4 and, your parents is like, don't do that. That's, something wrong. So I didn't really have any of this. And it was always like an open conversation. So I don't actually come from like a clinical background. I originally did my undergrad and my master's focused around finance and management, and I went into sustainability consulting. So I was in sustainability consulting for a long time because I was trying to understand why we had such a big disconnect with the ecosystem that we were living in. Like, why are humans trashing the planet? Like, what is going on in my early 20s? And I didn't understand why we felt so disconnected from our environment. Kind of like through, I think, working in that industry, I realized we're so disconnected from our environment because we're so disconnected from ourselves and one another. And it's really hard to connect to the ecosystem when you're so disconnected from yourselves, which kind of made me pave a little bit into like, what's going on in relationships? Like, what's happening there? And I've always had a curiosity into like how we relate. And then I've kind of found myself doing another whole degree around sexology. And I wanted to do it from a place of, I think there's a whole embodiment, holistic component. Again, we can't just say we're just emotional beings. We're just, we're all in our minds. I really wanted to have this like mind, heart, soul connection. This is why I kind of also wrapped in my Tantra training, so that I can look at like relationships and humanity and our sex and sexuality from a more holistic lens rather than just from a head to head, we're all up here. So it was a very unconventional path that got me here. And then the reason why I wanted to work more with startups and kind of bridge that gap of like technology and sex is because I wanted it to be accessible. I think there's amazing coaches. I think there's amazing therapists. And I think we all need those resources, but I wanted to have mass impact. How do I reach the most people that I can? Rather than just, do one-on-one work, which is also so important. We need both of those happening in tandem. And how do I make this information more accessible? Which is why now I am, a part of Arya. I'm their in-house sexologist. I think, the fact that we're able to reach thousands and thousands of couples every month is amazing. So this is why I also decided to bridge that gap between like holistic sexology and tech startups to just kind of have that mass impact.
Interesting. Yeah. It makes perfect sense that you would have this light bulb moment that it's all about disconnect and you're trying to connect not only people to themselves, people to each other, reach more people. So, speaking of couples and how many
Mhm.
do struggle with talking about sex, having sex, not having sex, what are some practical ways they can begin to bridge that divide?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sure you also get a lot of like questions around how do I talk to my partner about my desires and boundaries? And I think that conversation is an extension of like how comfortable are we communicating with our partner? And do we know ourselves enough to communicate what we want to communicate? I think when it comes to this subject, my biggest advice is rather than talking about um, initiating for sex or I want to have more sex or I want this or I don't want this is first to talk about actually like the connection piece. So rather than initiating for sex, let's initiate for connection and like connective conversations, which is a much more low hanging fruit, I would say. So I'm again big on embodiment. So I think again, when we schedule things, things tend to happen. Everybody has busy lives, everybody has kids, everybody's working. So unless we schedule for it, it's probably not going to happen. And it's a conversation that's very easy to push because it's uncomfortable. So if you can schedule and actually put it in your calendar, you're more likely to have that conversation. And then once you do, I think before you start to have the conversation, you can actually just come to a place of being present with one another and create some safety in each other's bodies. So an exercise I usually tend to guide couples through is just sitting in front of each other, eye gazing with one another, and just breathing together. Maybe you take 10 breaths together, maybe you take 20 breaths together. But what this is doing is this is co-regulating each other's nervous systems, and it's kind of bringing you into your body, into your heart, rather than coming from the mind and dropping to the heart, so that you can really have a authentic, connected conversation. So once you're connected and present, and then I think it depends on what kind of conversation you want to have. So we can go into the specifics of it, like, do you want more sex or is there something that's bothering you? But I guess the overall theme would be to frame this as an invitation and leading with curiosity rather than like accusing someone and being like, you don't do this and I don't like this. Um, what we know from our work with Arya is that like around 60% of couples actually don't know how to talk about sex. And again, this is a skill set that we don't learn because there's so much taboo and shame. So sometimes to have those conversations, it's also helpful to bring in a third party, which is again like what we do with Arya is if you need some help, we have an amazing intimacy deck of cards that kind of give you the prompts to get the conversation started. You can talk to your personal concierge if you're like, hey, I'm nervous about having this conversation with my husband. Do you have any tips? And based on your background, your love language, your intimacy language, your erotic personas, your concierge, which is your coach, can kind of give you tips. Because as much as everything is a one size fits all, it actually comes down to also your personal history, where you're at, what's your dynamic with your husband. So those would be my like general suggestions. But then I think if you need more help, one, to know that you're not alone, and two, that there is external resources like therapists and coaches, and also services like Arya that can help you have those conversations in a more low effort, high reward kind of way. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you start with scheduling, first of all, because
Hmm.
people think that's not very sexy. And
Yeah.
it's not about that. It's really about prioritizing
Hmm.
that you're going to have this conversation in your busy life, right? Because most people do not make this a priority. Life gets away, it gets away from us. And the other thing is the co-regulation piece. I mean, I've told some of my clients to, like at the end of a workday, just to hug each other, to feel each other's heart, to look in each other's eyes just for even a minute or two,
Yeah.
to breathe together, to coordinate your breathing can really just connect you without even saying a word. So I love that you start with being present, creating safety, attuning your body to the other
Hmm.
person, because that's so much of the conversation. And I think what happens is people try to have these conversations in the middle of sex, which is usually the worst
Totally.
time to have.
Totally.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, what happens if you are in the middle of intimacy and somebody's doing something that you're not happy with? How can you guide them in a way that doesn't feel critical or make them shut down or feel bad?
Yeah, yeah. And I think we've all been there, right? Like, I think we've all had experiences, whether it's even through kissing or sex, that you're kind of like, I'm really not feeling this, but I love my partner. So where do I go from here? I think, again, everything is energy. So first kind of reading the room and checking. I think the most gentle way that I kind of encourage people is saying, hey, can we pause for a second? Let's breathe. I want to show you this feels really good and I love being here with you, but can I show you something that's going to really take me to the next level? I really want to show you what I really, really enjoy. So, kind of praising your partner, you're not lying, right? Because you don't want to say, I love what you're doing when it's not what you're doing. But what you're saying is, hey, let's take a pause. I love being in this moment with you and I love connecting with you, and let me show you what I like. And then either using your hand or taking their hand and just showing what you like is a really gentle way of like suggesting, or if there's a type of pressure or emotion or area that you like, you can also, show it on their body. So if you like being kissed a certain way around your neck, you can say, hey, I really like, when you bite me, and then you kind of like demo it on their body. Again, it's all about intimacy is a space where we have the freedom to really go towards our edges. And as we grow, as our bodies change, as we have kids after the age of 20, 30, 40, our bodies change, the way we respond changes, our desires change. And when you have a long-term partner, we cannot just expect what worked, 10 years ago, 5 years ago to work in the current moment. So it's about how do you ongoingly kind of communicate your changes and your desires in a soft and gentle way where it feels inviting and not criticizing. So if it's in the moment, I would say try to use that kind of language and that kind of gentle guidance. But I agree that like if there is something that your partner does and you've known that they do that, that's their like go-to move and you really don't like it, then it's probably best to have that conversation like outside the bedroom. Again, whether that's through prompts like amazing intimacy card decks that we have, or that's through like, hey, like I love connecting with you. I would love to hear what else you want to explore and try. And is there anything I can do better? Kind of guiding it from there, and then like giving your feedback. I think it would be a positive way to go about it rather than be like, stop this and I hate
Right.
this.
Stop.
And, like I don't think that's very constructive, but yeah,
No, it would
yeah,
definitely not be constructive. And always starting with something positive, appreciation, and demonstrating and guiding. And because if we don't, people can't read our minds, right? They don't
totally,
know. And who wouldn't want to know how to do better? Like,
totally.
how would anybody feel if what they're doing that they think is working really well is actually turning
Mm.
somebody off, but they never knew because nobody told them? So I think that's an important piece. But I also, you brought up something about long-term relationships. So many of our listeners are not in long-term relationships. They're maybe beginning new relationships in
Hmm.
midlife, in their
Hmm.
post-menopause, where things can be painful. Men have
Hmm.
erectile dysfunction, women
Hmm.
have dryness, they've had a hysterectomy, whatever. Um, if people are in that place where they're just beginning a relationship
Hmm.
and they have hormonal issues or, you know, things that they need to talk about, but they're very sensitive, do you have any kind of approach that they could take?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is considering like this is not medical advice, considering like you've had a doctor and you know what's going on. I think it's just about being like comfortable with where you are in life, like what stage you are in life. And, there's so much I can say about the sexual dysfunctions we face, right? But let's take the examples. Let's say the most common examples maybe is dryness for women post-menopause and erectile dysfunction for men. I think if it's dryness post-menopause, knowing that, there's discomfort there, knowing all of the discomfort that might be associated with a new partner and sex. One, I think just taking that mental pressure off of, knowing that you don't need to do anything you don't want to do and it should never hurt. And then two, having the conversation ahead of time. I think just saying, hey, Really love connecting with you. I would really enjoy if we can take our time a little bit more on foreplay. It takes my body a little bit longer to get excited and ready for penetration. And I would love it if we can also use lube. I mean, I'm in my 30s. I've been repping lube since I'm in my 20s, and I'm going to rep it. I mean, it's something that every woman at any age, and stage of their life should, have, because it just increases sensation and pleasure for us. There's literally no downside. And all of this also comes with a lot of like taboo and shame around, oh, if you need lube, it means you're this and that. And so the more you kind of own where you are, the more you're actually shedding layers and finding empowerment in your own sexuality. So really advocating for your own needs. So if that's needing to slow down, if that's needing more lube, if that's needing more conversation, more check-ins throughout, more pauses, more breaks. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's just kind of coming to a place where you can advocate for your needs. And for me, it doesn't really matter what age you are. If you cannot advocate for your needs, I would pause on the sex and like focus on that first, because then there's going to be a disconnect and you're not going to feel so good. For men, I'll pause there before, if you want to say anything on that with the woman that you also know before we go to men.
Yeah, no, I think that that's such an important thing, that we have to feel safe to bring up anything.
Totally.
And it's not easy for most of us who don't have the skills, because nobody
Totally.
taught it to us, that we are comfortable saying, hey, I had a hysterectomy and I have dryness and I need lube, or I've had uncomfortable sexual experiences in the past and people did not listen to me. And so I
Yes.
need you to be able to hear me. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. I mean,
Totally.
I think I've also had somebody on who's in her 80s who is a sex expert. And she talks about how when she would get into a relationship, she would have her little packet of a little vibrator and her lube, and she would say, hey, this is my little kit that I bring
I love
along.
that.
And yeah, and then I mean she was very comfortable with it because she's a sex educator, and this is her field. But it's to also tell people, like, you don't have to just be uncomfortable because that's what your experience has been in the
Totally.
past. And then she would then open the conversation with men and say, well, what do you need? Because I knew a woman who was involved with a guy who had erectile dysfunction, but it was largely due to his medication that he was taking, and he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't taking care of himself and his blood
Mm-hmm.
pressure and all the other things. And the thing that really ended the relationship in the end, because it didn't bother her in the beginning, she was able to find other ways to be sexual without penetration.
Mm-hmm.
And it is possible to have penetration with erectile issues,
Mm-hmm.
but people don't always know that. But she ended the relationship because he really wasn't evolving and growing, and he wasn't willing to get any help at all. And she had become like very comfortable with her sexuality since her marriage ended, which was a pretty sexless marriage. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think that happens a lot to people later in life. But yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any other tips for men who are
Mm-hmm.
going through this, because it's pretty common as they get older.
Totally. I mean, and erectile dysfunction is actually really common in now like mid 20s, like men who are in their mid 20s. I think this has to do with a lot, right? Like um I find that a lot of sexual dysfunctions are not just the root of like cause of like one thing, it's multiple things like coming together. So stress, sitting, most of the time not moving your body, medication that you might be on, other past experiences, like all of that comes together. So again, of course, depending on the root of why you're having ED. Most of the time, also, I've talked to a lot of men who think they have erectile dysfunction when in reality they just need a bit more time, or they feel disconnected from their partner, or there's something else off in the relationship. So number one is just understanding where it's coming from. Is it medication? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it energetic? If it's physical, then of course, working with your doctor, working with a pelvic floor specialist. There's a lot of ways to build your body, build your pelvic floor muscles to work through erectile dysfunction. It's actually one of the quickest ways to, move past that if it's not preempted by a medication. If it is related to emotional stuff, we always think it's only just women that have their heart and their womb and their cervix connected, but it's also men as well. So if there's something off in the relationship, or if they're going through an extremely stressful period, your body's going to signal that, right? You can't just dissociate from the halfway down. So also just being honest about where you are. And then I think also looking at and this is for both women and men, I'm very much big on looking at your own pleasure routine before you look at your sex life with your partner. So what does your own self pleasure routine, masturbation routine look like? Because most of the time, the way we masturbate is the way we're actually having sex. So if you're a man and you have ED, let's say if you are masturbating really quick and fast, and you're ejaculating super fast, and you're watching porn, and you have a tight grip, and you're not using any like lube, then you're probably going to want to emulate that kind of sensation when you're with your partner. And if that doesn't happen, and it can't happen in real life with another person because it's hard to emulate, then you're going to feel disappointed and you're going to experience ED. So again, checking in your own masturbation routine and really self-cultivating this pleasure routine, right? Rather than a masturbation routine, really slowing down, really learning how to use your breath, your touch, your awareness, really learning maybe how to edge yourself without coming, and just working with your body in that way. In the moment of, exactly how you said, it's totally possible to have sex and sexual experiences when you have premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction. So it's again about one, being confident in your other skills, whether that's your mouth, your fingers, and then also communicating with your partner and really like understanding their body. And again, taking your time. I think we all have this idea and expectation of what sex looks like: a little bit of foreplay, a little bit of kissing, and then it's penetration, and then we orgasm, and then le fin. And that's kind of like the script that runs in everyone's brain, rather than it being okay that your erection might go through cycles, or you might not get it up, but you can maybe have sex in other ways. Expanding our ideas of what sex looks like, what pleasure looks like, is also possible. It's an area where I think, again, it's so easy to dissociate from and be like, I'm not even going there because I don't even want to go there. That's just like so painful and so embarrassing. And there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with it. I think intimacy and sex, especially with another person, really invites us to bring like the messy parts, the unintegrated parts of our humanity, and really step up to kind of having those conversations in a comfortable way.
Yeah,
Or in a
those are all
way.
really, good ideas. I mean, and I'm glad you brought up that it happens to younger people, especially with porn being so readily available and all the things that have changed with technology and social
Totally.
media, and so much has changed. And I just was thinking about a couple that I worked with, the woman, and she was in her 70s, and she met a man. She really liked him, and he almost didn't date her because he had some shame around his erectile dysfunction. And she had the courage to bring it up with him and to say, it's okay, we can just cuddle for now. Like, she made it a safe space for him. And they're in a lovely relationship now that would never have happened because he was shutting down. And so there's so many things that we can do, and it depends on what your priorities are, but also how comfortable you are with who you are and how you have uncomfortable conversations with anyone.
Totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you also, go ahead, you were going to say something?
No. And yeah, I think I love that the conversation always comes back to the safety piece, because really everything comes from that, right? I think when we talk about sex and intimacy, it's like, how do we bring back, or how do we cultivate or deepen connection that's rooted in safety? And again, I think that piece is something that we're not really taught. So, again, sometimes the conversation probably will not go perfect, but the fact that you are able to bring it up, the fact that you can acknowledge and kind of do your best to hold that space, I think goes a really long way, rather than like ignoring this like elephant in the room of, we're not going to talk about it. It's better to talk about it and fumble together than to just ignore it, right? So
Yeah,
totally.
100%. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts, like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last-first-date to learn more and claim this offer. How does technology help couples approach those uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak more to Arya since I'm dedicating my time there now. Um, I think I think we have a misunderstanding about technology and intimacy intersects, right? I think initially people are like, what does that mean? What does that look like? But I think what we're able to do is really first, everybody loves in a different way. Everybody has different intimacy languages as well. Like everybody's kind of super comfortable with their love language and their, apology languages. This kind of extends to our own erotic personas, our erotic desires. So one thing where we see technology really helping us when couples come to our platform is really identifying what kind of play styles, what kind of desires that you like. Once you can understand that, one, people are like always shocked. They're like, oh, my husband and I have different play styles. We've never even like thought about this, right? Then you're like at least starting from a place of knowledge and information. And the more information we have, the better we have. And then what we can do is based on your patterns, kind of assign what kind of things you might want to try. I think intimacy is also a space where there's a lot of edges, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you think about like, let's try this, I mean, unless you're, maybe looking at some article online or you go to a sex store with your partner, you don't really know what you can try because you don't know what's possible. So if we can use technology to understand what you like, then we can assign you what we call scenes that are like monthly guided experiences at a very low effort. And we can say, hey, we think you and your partner might really enjoy exploring Tantra this month because you both like connecting and you both like slow and sensual experiences rather than like hard impact. So why don't you try this? And here's everything that you'll need to try it. Here's all the content that you will need. And if you don't like it, then you can blame us because it wasn't none of your ideas anyway. So it's an easy, gentle way to guide people to try new things, bring more novelty into their relationship, maybe spice things up and maybe push them towards an edge where they're like, oh, I actually really like this. Or they might not like it. And that's also information that they use. So technology and understanding our patterns, it's not replacing human interaction in any way. And then obviously we have coaches on that you can chat with if you run into any sort of problems or you want to like understand a bit more of, wow, I really enjoyed this. Can you tell me more about what this means about myself? And two, I think I brought up this early on, is the accessibility side of it. I think when we have technology, information can become so much more accessible to people that might not have had it. For most of I guess I'll speak for my generation, most of our sex ed, most of our understanding and orientation was coming from porn. People learned how to have sex through porn. So to have platforms where, we can tell people, here's what the experts think, and here's like a guided soft way to really root your intimacy and connection rather than like, let's have more sex. Again, just is a much better approach when it comes to couples connecting. And I think it doesn't matter what age you have, we all have things that we can learn about our sexuality. So I would say really understanding yourself and like accessibility are two huge aspects of the intersectionality. But even with you, right? Like you were talking about your Facebook group, the fact that you're able to connect with so many women that you might maybe not have otherwise host in your house is like amazing. And the fact that they can share ideas and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think all of what you said is so true. I think that the love languages became an important thing for people, but it's so much more important to see this as more broadly. And there are many aspects of our personality and what we need and want that we don't even know. I remember watching Sex, Love, and Goop and how there were couples where he thought she was one way and she really wasn't when she did the erotic blueprint. assessment, and it's such an interesting thing. And I think that often we could go through life not even knowing the full breadth of our expression in many different areas, but pleasure, which is something that is just so accessible, we can have it. It's like we can
Totally.
create this. And many
Totally.
people have really boring sex lives or no sex at all. So I think the more you know, the more you can explore. I love the guided experiences, just having somebody suggest something that you may not have thought of or don't even know anything about. All of those things are really important. And you also mentioned the intimacy cards. I would love
Oh,
to know a
yes.
little more, like what's on, like give us an example of something that's on
Yeah.
the cards.
This is one of our like main like I love this intimacy card deck. I mean, I think, card decks are so in right now because it's such a fun way to just swift through and explore with your partner. But the intimacy card deck was created by our in-house experts and really finding questions and as well as challenges that you can do with your partner to explore those edges or see what might be curious. So it's a full-on card deck where depending on how spicy you're feeling, there's explorations or expressions. So um, sometimes it's easier to read a card and ask your partner something rather than like try to like have this conversation over dinner. So a lot of our couples, take these when they're out at dinner dates or something like that, and it's like a fun way to open the conversation. And there's things that are more intimacy, romantic forward, like what's something you're proud of this week that I did, to more let's say sex forward. So, what's the best experience you've ever had with me? Why was it good? So, it's a lot of reflection. It's a lot of like deep intimacy building exercises that are, I think, questions maybe we might not think of asking people or our partner that the deck allows you to do, and it's at least it's compact, you can take it anywhere, it's quite like low lift. But again, like I think everything starts with curiosity and play. So the more play, sometimes this topic gets really serious, it's because it's very heavy, it can be heavy with all the baggage that we all have. The more we can incorporate play, the more we can incorporate exploration and curiosity, I think the easier sometimes the energy becomes to move between two people. So we found that the card decks really, really work well. And we have different card decks, but the intimacy card deck is like the main one that we see that couples also like really enjoy on the platform. And we've had couples who've been married for like 10 years, 15 years, and they go through Arya for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year, and they're like, oh my God, like I didn't think there was any more to learn about my partner. And now we have this whole new layer of our relationship that we didn't even think we were both into. And that's really amazing to hear. Like every time I do sometimes user interviews, I mean it's amazing to think that a couple could be together for that long and they are still exploring and deepening, and they're just improving and feeling more connected. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
And you
it's amazing.
mentioned the erotic personas. Can you talk about the personas and how they help partners understand each other, like just the basic differences?
Totally. So we categorize you, and you can be more than one, similar to like love languages, but people tend to have one that's more forward. So when you come into Arya, you take a quiz, and your partner also goes through a short quiz that helps us determine which category of personas you fall into. So there's four personas that we have. The first one is the romantic, as the as the name suggests. So this is someone that's really prioritizing intimacy and communication, where emotional connection really plays a major role in their desire. So sex is this expression of love and intimacy, and they're really much focused on the journey rather than the destination of, let's say, wherever they're going. So that's the romantic. The second category of people we have are what we call the directors. So like these are people that enjoy more spontaneous and the spontaneity of sex and like the physicality of sex. So it's very straightforward. They might be a little bit more like goal oriented towards like the orgasm. And usually for directors, sex is kind of their main way of expressing love and connection. So similar to physical touch, this is kind of the intimacy language for that. The third category of people we have are connectors. So these are people that prioritize sensuality and stimulation. So this is all about like the senses. So someone who's very sensually tapped in. So whether that's the physical, the mental, the environmental, all kind of has to be perfect. The sacred space needs to be created. And then we have the adventurers who are the people that are very much into kink, forward, let's say play. So they like a lot of variety. They like a lot of different experiences. They like trying things. So we would call them the adventurers. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see like the different pairings of erotic personas when people sign up. It's interesting to see people think they're one way. Like someone might think they're like an adventurer, but then they realize they're romantic and they're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Even though I thought I was this, maybe this is actually the way I want to connect. So those are the four categories of people that we categorize you into, and then we'll kind of map out your desire and how it overlaps with your partner from that point. Based on, of course, the more scenes you go through, the more we understand what you like, what you don't like. This is where like the technology aspect comes in, that we can really like get to know you better and suggest better experiences, monthly experiences. So yeah.
Yeah, very helpful to know what your tendency is, where your highest tendency, because as you say,
Totally.
we're not usually just one thing.
Totally.
And that's why love languages are confusing to people too. They're like, well, I like gifts and I like personal touch and I like spending time with them, acts of service.
I like all of them.
I
Yeah.
like them all.
Which I agree. I think there's some controversy around that. And like,
Yeah.
categorization is always just, for me, it's always like just you having a bit more information, one more, data point as to where you are at, rather than like it being this like indicator boxed, place that you're setting yourself into. So it's more in terms of supporting rather than like defining, I would say.
Yeah. And when you know a lot about yourself or you're exploring these new ways of understanding yourself and your partner, or for people who are single, just to understand yourself until you meet your partner. And then you can
Totally.
communicate your needs and desires once you are in a partnership. It's
Totally.
just so helpful to have all that information because it
Totally.
makes your life better, it makes their life better. I love being around people who know themselves really well. That's like my favorite person to be around.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
It's empowering, it's encouraging, and nobody likes being asked, "Oh, so what do you like?" And you're like,
I don't
"I don't
know.
know what I like." And then,
I
it's
don't know.
like, where does your partner go from there? So
Yeah.
totally, totally.
Yeah. Guidance is helpful. So, as we come to the end here, I would love to know if you have any final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date.
Ooh. Oh. Recenter yourself rather than the other person when you go on your last first date. So rather than being so hyper focused on, am I sounding good? Does this person like me? Is this date going well? Oh my God, am I being interesting? I think, but this is maybe for my people pleasing, people out there, because that's me. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I think there's something really empowering about being like, how am I feeling right now? How do I feel in the presence and energy of this person? Do I feel relaxed? Do I feel like myself? Is this my anxiety or is this my excitement? And like, can I differentiate that? What kind of energy, what kind of person is this person bringing out of me? I think that was, it sounds really simple, but it was a huge reorientation I had when I went back into the dating scene after stopping for a bit. And it really shifted my entire way of connecting with someone and having an attachment to an outcome of, I want this date to go like this. I felt more relaxed and I was more like, how am I showing up and how do I feel? So that would be my advice for a person
It's
going to their first last date.
it's such an important advice. It's such important advice because we do tend to go in hoping to be liked. I mean, I think almost everybody,
Human
especially
nature.
in the beginning, it is human nature to just not want to be rejected. And we think of it as rejection if it doesn't work out. And it's not rejection. I mean, honestly, it's not supposed to work out with most people. And so if you go in just wondering, is this going to be a good connection? And how does my
Mm,
body feel? I have a whole debriefing method that I use with my clients that they ask themselves questions like that, because if you're so focused on being liked, you're missing the point of,
Mm,
is there a connection? And energetically it's something you can't know until you're in the presence of a person, and usually more than once. It's not
mm-hmm,
an hour and a half doesn't give you a full breadth of a person. It gives you an inkling of who this person is and
mm,
how your body feels in their presence, but how they listen, are they curious? Do they ask you questions? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Do you feel attractive in their presence? Do you feel attracted?
mm.
All of those things are important. So I think the idea of recentering yourself and focusing on yourself is just so important. And then when you're in the relationship, you can just go check out Arya and have a
Yes.
great relationship.
Come have
So
some more play. Yes, I love
yeah, so
that.
speaking of that, tell us how people can find you.
Yes. If you want to check out Arya, if you're in a relationship, whether short term or long term, and you want to, spice things up a little bit, you can Google Arya.fyi. That's our website, that's our Instagram, that's our TikTok, Facebook group as well, if you want to, see what other couples are saying. And then for me, you can link my Instagram. It's quite challenging. I am Tugce Balik. So maybe you can link it somewhere. That's also
Yeah.
that's my personal Instagram. And yeah. I mean, I so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for also having me on. I think it's so interesting and fascinating to, talk about the subject and also just focus on different age groups and like where people are at in their life, because although we sometimes feel like we're isolatedly going through an experience, it's actually such a common, like I feel like the problems that we all go through are so common across different age groups, and it's always a pleasure to me when I speak to wiser women and like hear from them, and I'm like, yes, it makes sense. Like it is what it is. And we're always growing, and I think there's something beautiful about like figuring it out as we go. There's something so human about that in all like age ranges of where we're at. So yeah, thank you for having me
Well,
on.
thank you. I enjoyed hearing your perspective, and especially for somebody in your 30s, you know a whole lot more than I did in my 30s. I
Super.
appreciate the work that you're doing to help couples to have more pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks everybody for listening. And if you love our show, please give us a high rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I read the reviews, so please leave something there and leave a comment. I think Spotify allows you to leave comments. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.